Hey guys, I can remember as a kid, basically pretending to be someone else. What I mean by that is like if I was jumping around from couch to couch or flying around on the furniture, I was pretending I was Superman. If my brother and I were doing some type of fighting or something like that, I was basically pretending I was Batman. And I remember thinking at the time that was just silly, right? And that's what kids do is you pretend and you try to go do things and use your creative imagination to do things. And it was a natural thing, like with most of us. Now, as I graduated, got a little older, um, I still used a lot of those traits as an athlete. And if those of you watching this right now were athletes at one time, lots of times you remember when you're participating athletes or messing around, like if you shoot a shot, you would say Jordan or yell the name of the pro athlete or something that you were, trying to emulate or trying to channel in. And it was always a fascinating tool to me because I used it a lot in high school and then I further used it on college, of basically kind of creating this second version of myself or this alter ego, if you will, by trying to channel in the strengths of those that I admired and gaining the characteristics of those in order to elevate my performance. And I remember, 10 or 12 minutes before games, I'd kind of go into this quiet pace in my head and I would think about what characteristics of that particular athlete I wanted to have for that night's performance. Of course, it was very consistent because that was, my purpose at the time was being the best basketball player I could. And I would create this basically second self to take me into competition, to push me over the top that I needed to be confident, to be sure of myself, to make sure, especially after bad performances, that I bounced back like a Michael Jordan would, for say. And I used this a lot, especially in athletics growing up, as I mentioned, and it was a huge advantage for me. And I strongly feel there's no way I would have been as successful as an athlete, especially at the college level, without having that as a tool. Um, and as you grow up, you kind of just grow out of that. It's just not a natural thing anymore. You don't feel you need to use a tool like that anymore. And moreover, you start to think that you've got it all figured out lots of times, especially when you kind of hit mid stride in your 20s, right? And for a lot of you that don't know my story, I went through some really bad times. I was worth several $1 million and lost it all when the real estate market crashed, completely collapsed several of the businesses that I owned at the time. And I had a real struggle after that kind of loss. I lost my confidence in myself, my ability to lead. I became depressed. I didn't want to be associated with anybody anymore. I started to neglect really my family, my kids, my wife in particular, and really just wanted to be left alone. And, just as I had thought, okay, I needed to make some changes, the FBI came knocking at my door one day. I got indicted for a crime I didn't commit in relating to a real estate transaction. And long story short, after years of battling, I ended up accepting a plea deal because I couldn't take the risk of being ripped away from my family and put in prison, especially for something I didn't do. And obviously, when you do accept a plea deal like that, you get labeled, you get judged. And literally, my life just continued to spiral down this path. That being said, I really had a hard time once I started to find the tools to get out of the hole that I was in. I had a really hard time kind of gaining and tracking momentum. I had a really hard time building any kind of sustainable forward moving progress towards my new purpose was to bounce back from what I had gone. And what I realized is a lot of the situations that I was in, I was taking this battered, you know, this damaged individual, as in me, into these situations. So for instance, if I had to make, a presentation to sell something, I was going into these presentations feeling very insecure. What are they going to think of me? Do they know I have failed so miserably? My business crumbled. I now have this background issue, and who's going to trust anybody with a background issue, right? And those kind of thoughts were entering my mind just before I go into these presentations. And it was an absolute disaster, just setting me up for failure. And that's exactly what it did. And I failed time and time again. And one day I'm sitting in my car about 10 minutes before I need to go into this house to present my services. And I start to kind of think to myself, man, Maida, what if I dug a little deeper here? And I went into this meeting, like someone that I saw in a movie, like the most confident sales presenter who knows everything, highly knowledgeable, and has this level of surety and confidence in themselves. So I started to think a little bit, but well, I used to do that as an athlete all the time. And as a little kid, I was Superman all the time. So I know kind of exactly how that made me feel and how that helped me. So let's take it into this instance and see how it feels. So sure enough, I go ahead and go through the practices of kind of just clearing my mind, taking these characteristics into frame and putting a name to it, which is very important, and then going into that person, going into that character, if you will. And I step into that meeting and absolutely kill it. I have no insecurities. I have no lack of confidence issues at all. I go in there, nail the presentation, get the sale, walk out of there, give myself a high five for kind of finding this secret weapon, if you will, that kind of took me from this insecure, really doubting myself to basically this better version of myself. And the more I started thinking about this process, gosh, you know what? There's other areas of my life that I have a purpose for. Being a better father, being a better husband, being a better businessman, and being a better coach. And I'm going to seek out and use this practice and use this theory, this second self theory, basically using an alter ego, that when I have areas of weaknesses in these areas, I'm going to bring in this alter ego. And so I started to do that as a husband, as a father, as a guy trying to restart his business, as a coach for kids, both on mental and in sports. And then also as I started to get into this passage of coaching fathers and men in particular, of using this theory of, all right, creating the best version of myself, creating this alter ego to go into these situations. And sure enough, I started to build a little momentum in all these areas that I was really struggling in. And momentum does what? Right? It just continues to build. And all of a sudden, you start knocking goals out. You start feeling confident and things like that. And that momentum grows and grows and grows, and it steamrolls for you. So as I started to practice this, again, just kind of from what I had learned as a kid, I started looking up a little bit into this theory. Like, gosh, I know that I just didn't come up with this, right? And sure enough, I start to realize that there's been a ton of research done in this aspect of using multiple identities for making sure that you show up as your best self. And I read a fascinating book by Todd Herman called The Alter Ego Effect, and I looked at that and I just was like, wow, there really is a system and a method to this madness. And it wasn't just me kind of being silly and, hey, look what I found. It works for me, but it actually is scientifically backed. As a matter of fact, it's so supported that when you just go in to any situation in your life, because we have so many vastly different situations, just going in with this one particular identity, who is you, or quote unquote, your authentic self, is actually more harmful, right? So we have the power of our creative imagination. We have the power of our ability to adapt. And we weren't born insecure. We weren't born with a lack of confidence. Those are just life events that may have happened to us along the road that has made us think that way or tilt towards a certain behavioral pattern. But that's not who we are, right? And we have the ability to change that and create different versions of ourselves to reflect that. And I have found nothing more powerful than using a second self or using an alter ego to help advance my weaknesses and get over them in certain aspects of impact that I was trying to make quicker than using this method. There's been nothing that I have found that literally, like I mentioned, 10 minutes prior to that meeting, going into it, really changed everything. And it was almost like I was kind of an actor, if you will. Now, it's not an imposter thing. It's not a lack of authenticity. That was who I am. I am a confident person and a sure person. And because of something I went through, that changed how I perceive that. But once I changed my perspective, like I have a little more control of that. And a fun and creative practice was to build this alter ego a little bit and take that character who I named, which is a very important part of it. I named that character before going into that event and just absolutely killed it. And I'll share a quick story with you. I was speaking a few years ago to a bunch of youth basketball players and their parents, and there's a couple hundred people in the crowd. And with youth, it's really fun because, the youth players are oftentimes still practicing this just by nature. It's fun, right? So I'm talking about the power of kind of channeling that alter ego and that second self and how to build it and sustain it and build, and whatever your weaknesses might be from a mental perspective as an athlete, how to create this second self to overcome those. And, it's a really fun conversation I'm having, and the kids are asking a bunch of questions. And I finish my speech, and everybody's doing great. Lots of thank yous, and some of the kids today are still practicing it now that they're much older and having a lot of success in sports. But the main encouraging part was that this was one of the first times I gave this presentation, was the fact a lot of parents came up to me and how they were going to use it. And one story in particular, which was just phenomenal, was father comes up to me and he's dressed kind of raggy and looks like he's fallen on some hard times. And he tells me he's been through 10 job interviews. He's got a very important one tomorrow. And he's really been struggling with confidence in these interviews. He finds himself stumbling a lot. He finds himself unable to really focus. And he's kind of letting insecurities because of the 10 interviews he's had, not one has called back. And he said, so about after the fifth one, I started getting really insecure about myself. So he goes, tomorrow, I'm kind of tired of what it's not working. So I'm going in and I'm going to use this second self theory you've been talking about. And I go, man, that's awesome, buddy. Here's what I want to do. And I give him my number and I say, call me an hour before you go into that interview, because we're going to go through a really quick practice. We're going to write down some of the characteristics you need. We're going to name this character that you're going to go in as, and you're going to nail the interview. So he calls me the next morning. We go through the practice. He goes through to the interview, calls me when he gets out of there, and he goes, Dave, I nailed it. Man, I'm about 90% sure I've got this job. I was just on fire. I felt confident, comfortable. I was talking. I was really articulate in everything I said based on this exercise we went through. And that's normally not me. I was like, that's good, buddy. Give me a call. Let me know how it goes. I assume it'll be a week or two before I hear from you. Sure enough, I hear back from him 15 minutes later. He says, I got the job. I nailed it. And I was like, man, that's just fantastic, right? So what he did is he took the power of just generating kind of this second self, this alter ego, and he used that to go into this moment of impact in his life where he had to perform at his best. And it turned out fantastic. There is nothing that I have found that has turned around people that I've worked with quicker when it comes to the moments of impact in their life than using the second self and the alter ego method. It really is a powerful tool. It is absolutely backed by psychiatrists, and you can find all kinds of studies about the psychological benefits of going into those moments as a second version of yourself, a best version of yourself that you have custom built for that moment. I use it a ton even today. I'm not naturally a really great speaker, so to say, but I speak several times throughout the year. And every time before I go up there and speak, I'm getting nervous, my stomach's in knots, but then I just start to channel and I start look at admiring speakers that I have in my life, like Tony Robbins, other people like that are big, powerful speakers. And I start to look at their characteristics and I build out Speaker Dave from those characteristics right before I go on any stage. And as soon as I take that step up, all that nervousness, all that insecurity about if they're going to believe me, how can they trust me, hopefully I deliver, all of that's gone. And I am more confident and sure of myself based on that exercise because that's a moment of impact and I'm able to really channel and use the benefits of the character that I've created in that moment. And that's where there's huge benefits when using kind of the alter ego method or the second self theory. And again, you can do plenty of research. I'm always open to help anybody with it because I'm so passionate about the quick turnaround that you can have when using this method, especially in areas where in your life where you need quick turnaround. And maybe it's just that weakness that's holding you back. So reach out to me anytime for more tips, for more advice, or anything you need. Please reach out to me directly. You can subscribe to this channel and also get on my other social media and other aspects to learn more about not only how we help fathers define their purpose and gain confidence and really be mission and purpose driven. And anything we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out.